February 21, 1930. Florence, Arizona. The clock ticks past 5 a.m. A cold, dimly lit room filled with silent witnesses awaits. A woman, Eva Dugan, stands at the gallows. She is about to become the first woman executed in Arizona's history. But what was meant to be a routine execution would soon spiral into a moment of chaos and horror that would change the state's approach to capital punishment forever. As the trapdoor opened, the expected fate was not as anticipated. The procedure went wrong and the outcome left everyone in the room stunned. Eva Dugan's final moments were far from the dignified end the justice system intended. In a matter of seconds, everything changed. What was supposed to be a clean execution ended in a grotesque twist. What went wrong in that execution? What led to a woman with a troubled past being sentenced to die? And why did her death forever alter how Arizona dealt with executions? The answers to these questions may surprise you. And if shocking death row twists like this interest you, feel free to subscribe. I cover real cases that get even more unbelievable than this one. Eva Dugan was born in 1878 in Salisbury, Missouri. From a young age, her life was marked by hardship. Abandoned by her husband, she found herself responsible for raising 2 children alone. Left to provide for her family, she moved to Alaska during the Klondike Gold Rush in the early 1900s. In this tough environment, Eva worked as a cabaret singer and later as a prostitute to make ends meet. While these were difficult years, they were a reflection of the challenges she faced in order to survive. These experiences would later play a significant role in her story. Over time, Eva Dugan moved south, eventually settling in Arizona, where she took a job as a housekeeper. It was here in her later years that she began working for Andrew Mathis, a reclusive rancher living alone in the desert. Little did she know, her job would set the stage for a chain of events that would lead to tragedy. Andrew Mathis, born in 1861, had a history that was far from ordinary. He had spent time in federal prison and was known for his involvement in a notorious incident in 1898, in which he was part of a mob that participated in the lynching of 2 Native American youths. This violent history followed him into his later years and stained his reputation for the rest of his life. By the time Mathis moved to Arizona, he had retreated from the world, trying to escape his violent past. He had become a rancher, a man living in isolation with only a few acquaintances. His relationship with Eva Dugan, like much of his life, was complicated. He hired her to help on his ranch, but their interactions were strained and marked by tension. Eva Dugan would soon become caught in a whirlwind that she could not escape. In the days leading up to the crime, Eva Dugan and Andrew Mathis had a falling out. Mathis fired Eva on January 27, 1927, and the following day he disappeared. Along with him went his car and belongings. Eva, who had been dismissed, was now on the run, and the police quickly started to suspect that her disappearance and Mathis were linked. When Mathis' body was discovered months later, the investigation took a darker turn. As the investigation unfolded, the details of Eva Dugan's life began to emerge. The troubled relationship with Mathis, her mysterious past, and the questions surrounding her motives began to raise more questions than answers. What was once seen as a routine housekeeper's job had turned into a chilling story of survival, deceit, and a crime that would change the course of Arizona's legal history. On January 27, 1927, Andrew Mathis fired Eva Dugan from her job as a housekeeper at his ranch in Arizona. Tensions had been building between the two for some time, though the exact reasons behind the firing remain unclear. The next morning, Mathis disappeared, taking with him his Dodge coupe and several other personal items. Eva Dugan was also nowhere to be found. Neighbors reported seeing her attempting to sell Mathis' possessions, further raising suspicions about her involvement in his disappearance. The following days were filled with questions and uncertainty. Without a body or any clear evidence, authorities struggled to understand what had happened to Mathis. Initially, the police had no witnesses, no leads, and no solid clues to explain his sudden disappearance. As the investigation continued, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. In June 1927, Mathis' body was discovered in a remote area of his ranch. The body had been badly decomposed, making it difficult for forensic experts to determine the cause of death. The lack of clear evidence and witnesses posed a significant challenge for authorities, leaving them with few options to move forward. However, there was something that could not be ignored: Eva Dugan's behavior. After Mathis' disappearance, Dugan had been seen trying to sell his belongings, an act that seemed highly suspicious given the circumstances. Her actions, along with the timeline of events, began to make her the prime suspect. But despite these suspicions, the authorities had no direct evidence to link her to Mathis' death. The case took a major turn when, in July 1927, a postcard from Eva Dugan surfaced. The postcard, mailed from White Plains, New York, became the crucial lead investigators needed to track her down. This development led to her arrest, but by then she had already left Arizona, moving across state lines to avoid detection. Despite the lack of a murder weapon and the challenges in examining the body, the case against Eva Dugan began to take shape. Her actions and the evidence that did exist pointed toward her involvement in Mathis' death, even if the exact circumstances remained unclear. The investigation uncovered that Eva Dugan had been trying to flee the area immediately after Mathis' disappearance. This, along with her attempt to sell his possessions, created a compelling case. The forensic challenges continued to complicate matters. The decomposition of Mathis' body made it nearly impossible to determine an exact cause of death. Still, the circumstantial evidence stacked up against Eva Dugan. Investigators were left with a growing sense of certainty, though they could never fully prove what had happened. The lack of physical evidence did not stop the police from charging her with theft and murder, but it left many questions still unanswered. As the investigation unfolded, the authorities struggled to piece together the full story, but the case was slowly becoming clearer. Eva Dugan had been the last person to see Mathis alive, and her actions following his disappearance made her the central figure in the mystery surrounding his death. The trial of Eva Dugan began in February 1928, a little over a year after the disappearance of Andrew Mathis. This case, steeped in mystery and suspicion, captivated not only the people of Arizona but also drew the attention of the entire country. It was not just the crime that intrigued the public, but the circumstantial nature of the evidence that made this case one of the most discussed legal battles of the time. In her defense, Eva Dugan and her legal team argued that Mathis' death had not been a result of foul play. According to Dugan, Mathis had died after eating rotten meat, more specifically poisoned rabbit. The defense claimed that this unfortunate incident had caused Mathis' death and that there had been no intention to harm him. Additionally, Dugan suggested that a young man, Jack, had been involved in the situation. She argued that the boy and Mathis had an altercation, which might have led to the rancher's accidental death during the confrontation. The defense focused on Dugan's lack of intent in the crime and painted her actions as those of someone trying to handle an unexpected situation. However, the defense also had to contend with a troubling aspect of Eva Dugan's past: her multiple marriages. Each of her husbands had mysteriously disappeared, leaving behind unanswered questions. The defense, though, downplayed the significance of this history, claiming that these events were coincidental and did not suggest a pattern of violent behavior. The prosecution took a much darker view of Eva Dugan's involvement in Mathis' death. They presented evidence showing that, shortly after Mathis' disappearance, Dugan had attempted to sell Mathis' belongings, including his car and personal property. The prosecution argued that this was a clear indication that Dugan was trying to profit from his death, a motive that seemed to fit with the circumstances surrounding his sudden vanishing. Moreover, the prosecution noted that Eva Dugan was the last person seen with Mathis before his disappearance. Her sudden departure from Arizona, along with the fact that she had no valid explanation for selling his possessions, suggested to the jury that she had something to hide. The prosecution painted Eva Dugan as someone who had intentionally killed Mathis for his money, using her actions after his disappearance as key evidence of her guilt. Additionally, the prosecution brought up the troubling history of Eva Dugan's previous husbands, suggesting that the mysterious disappearances of her spouses were not mere coincidences but part of a larger, disturbing pattern. This history, they argued, made her the prime suspect in Mathis' death. Despite the lack of direct evidence, the prosecution's case was compelling. There was no eyewitness testimony to directly link Eva Dugan to the crime, and the body of Mathis was too decomposed to offer any concrete forensic details. Still, the circumstantial evidence, including Dugan's suspicious behavior and her attempts to sell Mathis' belongings, left little doubt in the minds of the prosecution that she was involved in his death. For the defense, the lack of direct evidence was a challenge. They argued that it was too speculative to assume that Eva Dugan had intentionally murdered Mathis. Her behavior, while suspicious, did not necessarily prove she had killed him. The defense suggested that the lack of a murder weapon and the lack of a clear cause of death made it impossible to definitively accuse Dugan of murder. After hearing both sides, the jury deliberated. Despite the absence of direct proof and the defense's argument that the death was accidental, the jury found Eva Dugan guilty of first-degree murder. They were convinced that her actions, coupled with the evidence presented, pointed to her as the perpetrator. The jury's decision was not unanimous, but the circumstantial case was strong enough to lead them to that conclusion. After the conviction, the case moved to the sentencing phase. The jury, after careful consideration, handed down a sentence of death by hanging. This marked a pivotal moment in Arizona's criminal history, as Eva Dugan became the first woman in the state to receive a death sentence. The sentencing sparked widespread debate. Many questioned whether the evidence was truly sufficient to justify such a harsh penalty. Others believed that Eva Dugan had earned her punishment due to her suspicious history and actions following Mathis' disappearance. Regardless of public opinion, the verdict was final, and Eva Dugan was now facing the ultimate consequence for the death of Andrew Mathis. On February 21, 1930, Eva Dugan was set to become the first woman in Arizona to face execution. The day began like any other, but the events that followed would soon become part of the state's infamous criminal history. At 5 a.m., the execution was scheduled to take place. Eva Dugan was led to the gallows, and everything seemed set for what was thought to be a routine procedure. However, the moment the trapdoor opened, something went terribly wrong. The rope failed to break her neck properly, leading to an outcome that left everyone in the room in a state of confusion. The procedure, meant to be swift and final, became a moment of shock and disorder. The witnesses, expecting a clean end to Eva Dugan's life, were confronted with an execution that went terribly awry. The witnesses to this event were immediately struck with horror. Several reported feeling a mix of disbelief and shock, while some fainted at the sight. This was far from the dignified execution that had been planned. Instead, the scene quickly became one of chaos, leaving the room in stunned silence. What should have been an orderly process had turned into something completely unforeseen. In the immediate aftermath, the public response was swift and intense. News spread quickly that Eva Dugan's hanging had gone horribly wrong. Arizona's execution practices came under heavy scrutiny, with the public questioning the humanity of the hanging method. Witnesses, journalists, and lawmakers all expressed their dismay over the botched execution. It was a public spectacle that no one could ignore. The Arizona authorities, faced with widespread criticism, had no choice but to address the situation. They had to find a way to respond to the public outcry that followed. The botched execution pushed Arizona's government to reconsider how executions should be carried out. In the wake of the incident, Arizona officials began to explore alternatives, recognizing that hanging was no longer seen as an acceptable method. By 1934, the state had officially abandoned hanging as its primary method of execution. It was replaced with the gas chamber, which was believed to be a more humane and effective form of capital punishment. The botched execution of Eva Dugan had been the driving force behind this change, signaling a major shift in the way the state would handle future executions. Eva Dugan's legacy would endure, though not in the way anyone could have expected. She would forever be known as the only woman ever executed in Arizona. Her death, though controversial, played a significant role in shaping the future of the death penalty in the state. Arizona would never again use hanging, and her execution would be remembered as the catalyst for that monumental change. The social impact of the botched execution went far beyond Arizona. Across the country, people began to question whether the death penalty in any form was truly just. The incident sparked a larger conversation about capital punishment and whether it was time to reconsider its use altogether. Many argued that Eva Dugan's execution exposed the flaws in the system and led to a wider debate on how society should handle those convicted of the most heinous crimes. Some believed the case demonstrated the need for a fairer system, while others defended the use of the death penalty, citing its necessity for justice. The case of Eva Dugan brings to light profound questions about the fairness of the justice system. Was she a cold-blooded murderer, or a woman ensnared by circumstantial evidence in a system that might have rushed to judgment? Without clear witnesses or direct evidence, the case against Eva Dugan rested on the suspicious behavior she exhibited following Mathis' disappearance, and the story of his death was clouded in ambiguity. Did Eva kill Mathis for his money, or was she the victim of an overzealous prosecution? Eva Dugan's trial raised uncomfortable questions about how the justice system handles people with a checkered past. The prosecution's case rested on circumstantial evidence, including Eva's attempts to sell Mathis' belongings, but is that enough to convict a woman of first-degree murder? And does a troubled history with men who mysteriously disappeared truly serve as evidence of a criminal nature? The ethical and moral questions raised by Eva Dugan's execution are still relevant today, especially in the debate surrounding capital punishment. How do we balance the need for justice with the risk of punishing an innocent person? Eva Dugan's case was a reflection of a legal system that made judgments based on limited evidence and possibly flawed assumptions. In today's world, the debate over the death penalty continues. Was Eva Dugan's execution an act of justice, or did it reflect a time when legal practices were less refined and more driven by public opinion? The events surrounding Eva's trial offer a chilling reminder of the consequences of an imperfect system and the lasting impact on those caught in its web. Did Eva Dugan deserve the death penalty, or was she a victim of a system that focused too much on circumstantial evidence? Was her execution truly just, or was it a tragic mistake? I want to hear your thoughts. Did Eva Dugan get what she deserved, or was the system at fault? Leave your comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime cases that ask us to think about justice, fairness, and the choices we make.